It's time for Where You Live with Gene and Tony, the show that's all about owning, buying, selling, renting, and association management. If it involves a home, we'll talk about it. Here's your chance to get your homeowner questions answered. From the Concierge Landscape Studios, here's Gene and Tony.
Needed the shelter of someone's arms, and there you were. Needed someone to...
There we go. Second time's a charm. No, maybe that's third time's a charm, but a little inside joke, I guess. Good morning, everybody. This is Gene Sullivan.
And this is Tony Crockett. How are you today, Gene?
I'm good.
That's good.
And we've got a great show for everyone today. We've got some great stories. First, in the first hour here, we're going to be taking a look at the state of Florida is considering cutting the courts out of the foreclosure system. We're going to talk to you a little bit just what that means. We also have a story. This is an interesting one. Again, happening in Florida. A developer, or I guess it would be an investor, came in and purchased, what was it, like 90% of all the units in one property. It was only a couple of years old because they had gone into foreclosure, and now is stripping the rights of the few owners who still live there and have been maintaining their mortgages. And I guess this is something that hasn't happened just once, but it's been happening repeatedly in Florida. We're going to talk about that. What does that mean to you? What are your rights as a homeowner living in an association? And then this was a cute story that happened in the Minneapolis Star and Tribune earlier. I call it the tale of two Shirleys.
Be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Yes, there we go. Thank you. And we've got a story of not only two women who have the same first name and last name, but spelled differently, but they have the same. They all have one grandson with the same name, spelled differently. And then this association has not only that, but they have two Andersons and also two Johnsons as well.
Doesn't everyone have two Andersons and two Johnsons?
Oh, I guess
least?
Everybody does, yes.
Yeah.
But you get the idea. There must be some confusion sometimes in that condo association. So those are just some of the stories that we have for you. As always, we're going to begin, though, right now with property management in the news. Property management in the news is brought to you today by Pest Control Services. When you need to get rid of unwanted pests in your home or rental property, call someone who's responsive, professional, and a proud member of Angie's List. That's owner Greg Keener. Give him a call, 952-894-9748, Pest Control Services. And so, as we promised, this is that first story coming out of Florida. The state of Florida is considering cutting the courts out of foreclosures. In Tallahassee, Florida, the push is on to cut the courts out of the foreclosure process. Now, supporters of this concept, which, by the way, this is used in about 30 states in the U.S. right now, says that it will, one, speed up foreclosures, two, it will get houses back into the real estate market, and three, will boost the economy. Now, the opponents of this are saying it puts property owners at the mercy of banks and is probably taking away some of their rights. The governor of Florida, Rick Scott, House Speaker Dean Cannon, and Senate President Mike Herodopoulos all say they're interested in considering this legislation and this change in Florida so judges won't have to referee foreclosures. It says the House Civil Justice Subcommittee on Tuesday heard a presentation on foreclosures detailing states that include courts in the process versus those who don't. The bottom line, people are saying, is foreclosures take a lot longer and are always more expensive in states that involve courts, said state economist Amy Baker. She gave, as an example here in the article a little bit further on, she said you have, on the average, the foreclosure process in states like Arizona take 392 days, 511 to California, and you do that in comparison to Florida, which uses the courts, 638 days to process a foreclosure. Now, Governor Scott says that's too long, and in a recent interview to the Times-Herald, he said, it's not good for anybody in the process. It costs money. Either the homeowners lose money or the lenders lose money. He said, and the longer it takes, it slows down what actually happens in the real market. Scott said he's eager to learn more about how making the switch might impact Florida's housing market. He said, if we do go down that path, does it really change anything? And we've got to make sure that citizens are treated fairly. We can't create an environment where the homeowners aren't treated fairly. Now, the speaker, Cannon, he said, of course, if they're going to make this change, he said, the devil is in the details. Now, isn't that true? That's always the case.
Your comment was, that's true of just about everything,
That's
isn't
right.
it? Yeah.
But he said we need to consider any and all options for moving beyond the foreclosure crisis. So they're just trying to reach and try and grab at something that might work at being able to process things along more quickly. Much of the state's housing crisis is caused by a glut of homes awaiting foreclosure, said Anthony DeMarco, who's the executive vice president of government relations for the association. He said if you can move more quickly, properties can get back on the market and it will stimulate the economy. Everybody wants the economy stimulated. So he said, one, you won't have a blight. Number two, you'll have property taxes will get paid. Three, condo fees and homeowner association fees will be paid. And fourth, people will buy paint and furniture. So this will be the end of all those troubles.
That's interesting to me that he's including the paint and furniture
and furniture
economic
as well.
recovery, but he's probably right about that.
Yeah. What do you think of this?
Well, as you know, Gene, Minnesota allows for foreclosure by advertisement is what it's called in this state. And that's a process that does not include going to court. The bank does not have to get a judgment from a court in order to foreclose on the property, and it is more efficient. But Minnesota also has the option to foreclose by judgment, so it offers both options to a bank.
Minnesota could go either way, and there's there are pros and cons
to both.
That's
both
right.
Ways. I would say, in my experience, or from what I've heard, most foreclosures are by advertisement. It's the most expedient process. And in this crisis, with so many foreclosures happening, I can see why Florida's courts are overwhelmed.
Yeah. I think the people that are opponents to this legislation right now, they're thinking probably is anything that lessens the amount of time that a homeowner has in trying to deal and get their life back together and get this turned around is just kind of giving them the short end of the stick. And I don't know if that is necessarily the case. I mean, certainly Governor Scott mentioned this in the article here too, and others did as well, and that is they want to make sure that homeowners are treated fairly. But it begs the question, what does it mean to treat someone fairly in going through the foreclosure process?
Yeah.
Does that necessarily mean 600 days, 500 days, or whatever?
Right, that's right. In Minnesota, in foreclosure by advertisement, there's a 6-month redemption period, which I think is very generous, actually. So that means from the point that the sheriff's sale occurs and the foreclosure happens, the owner of the house has 6 months to redeem the house.
Yeah.
In other words, if he can come up with all the money to pay it off, he gets to keep the house.
Yeah.
I think that's very generous.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the details that Florida needs to look at to decide what is most fair to the owner.
And in reality here, too, it isn't just those 6 months, because before you get to that 6-month period, a person has probably already been late for several months already.
Well, it takes several months for the banks to get to the point where they're ready to foreclose. That's true.
Yes. So you're talking about actually not 6 months, but a person who's probably at this point had, at least in Minnesota, a person's probably had at least 7 to 9 months, prior.
I would guess. Now, Gene, tell me, in foreclosure by judgment in the state of Minnesota, is the redemption period the same?
The redemption period is the same.
All right.
Yes.
So I can see that for homeowners who can and intend to redeem their home, having to go to court over the foreclosure does increase their costs because now they have added court fees and attorney's fees to the amount they owe to the bank. So in that way, in that situation, it's more costly for the homeowner to do foreclosure by judgment.
And that's the thing that you've got to really weigh. Yes, you may have some more time, but because it takes more time, it's going to take more details with individuals being involved, court costs. It's going to, those are costs that are added that the person has to also redeem as well as whatever that they're behind.
In order to keep their house. Yeah.
So I guess some are saying this is something that could be negative. I'd like us to take a look at this a little bit more. We've got to take a quick break. But Tony, when we get back, I'd like us to address some of the statements made or claims saying that if we can only get properties back out of foreclosure, we'll get them on the market again. That's going to stimulate the economy. It's an interesting comment. I'd like to talk about that, but after these messages.